everyone. I just wanted to say hello. This is Victoria from Nutrition to You, and I am lucky enough to have Dr. James Kelley with me today. Dr. James Kelley is with L-Nutra, which is the parent company that makes ProLon. So Dr. Kelley is going to talk about ProLon and quarantine and how to stay healthy while we're all locked away. Dr. Kelley, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with L-Nutra and what you do for them?
Sure. Hi, I'm James. I'm one of the medical science liaisons for L-Nutra, the makers of ProLon. I've been here since pre-launch. Prior to this, I'm an MD MBA, so I've done a lot with medical innovation. I help early stage companies get off the ground. I help them get funded, patented, researched, all the stuff that you need to do to really make sure you have a good product. And I work with a lot of doctors, nurses, clinicians, healthcare practitioners, dietitians, nutritionists, et cetera, on all of that. So prior to joining L-Nutra, I worked with a laparoscopy company that we helped launch on the West Coast, a spinal implant and other orthopedic equipment company that we helped launch as well. And then I worked with the Cleveland Clinic Innovations Group at a place called the Innovation Institute in Newport Beach for several years before coming on board at L-Nutra. And I actually knew the founder, Dr. Walter Longo, from my time at USC doing my entrepreneurship and innovation MBA there. So I've known him for almost a decade at this point. And when we were ready to launch, they brought me on and said, can you help us get this going? And I jumped at the opportunity. Been here ever since. So mostly what I do here is train doctors, train nurses, train healthcare practitioners, answer medical questions that are not drug related or claim related, kind of educate on the program and try to help people out as best we can. So
super, thanks for that. So I've been doing ProLon for probably about a year and a half. I love the program, but I know a lot about it. And as a doctor, maybe you can introduce our viewers to what ProLon is and how it got started and what the purpose is, and et cetera.
Yeah, so the concept behind it is that the first thing you got to ask is why you would want to mimic a fast. So why is fasting beneficial? And as far as we can tell from all of the research we've looked at, there are a couple of things that happen when you put a body in a fasting state. And first, you start by defining what is fasting. It's generally abstinence from food or drink of some kind for some duration of time. And then going a little deeper, what does it mean to the body? It's the switch from burning glucose and stuff you're eating to burning your own fat for fuel, not just ketosis, because ketosis can be fed from fat from the outside world. We're literally talking about a starvation-based ketosis internally. But really what we look at is the molecular level, what's happening inside your cells. And what specifically happens is you turn off these things called nutrient sensing pathways that kind of are these little cascades of, if you eat certain foods, you trigger the alarms in the body, you send the signal that food is present and it's time to grow. And if you deprive them of the triggers and you turn those alarms off, the cells go into a stress-resistant state that's restorative and rejuvenative in some capacity, activate what's called autophagy, which is cellular cleanup of old, worn-out debris, accumulated misfolded proteins, repair of mitochondria, things like that, just making your cells function more optimally. And it's the body's way to try to optimize so that it's not wasting resources because you're not bringing anything in. So it's got to function as efficiently as possible to make sure you stay alive and well, and not just alive and well, but also able to beat your neighbors to the next food. So it's this built-in mechanism to sort of keep you around and make you function the best you can so you can win. What we figured out with L-Nutra, and this is what Walter Longo at the University of Southern California's Longevity Institute had spent 20 plus years, and at this point, close to almost $50 million of mostly federally funded research money, validating that this is exactly what occurs in your cells and that it can be tricked, because most people can't do a true water fast for long enough to have these benefits. I'm sorry to keep going on about this. I just think it's really important to understand why. Yeah. So the reason you would want to do multiple days, and you can't just do it in 12 to 16 hours like an intermittent fast, is because in order to activate these cellular cleanup pathways, you have to be in a prolonged fasting state for at least 48 hours to even turn them on, really. And then to maximally get all the benefit, it really doesn't occur till day 3 and 4. And then it leaks over into day 5. So it really takes several days in a row. And what we figured out was that most people can't tolerate that. And there are some other issues as well, like you're not eating anything, so you're not supporting your lean body mass, and you're not potentially maintaining as much blood volume as you might be, because you're just not getting any salt to help you hold on to water. But you can trick these pathways that tell you you're in a fasting state by staying just below their kind of threshold. So there is a ratio and amount of macronutrients of protein, sugar, carbs, and fat that I can sneak into the body if I use the right protein, carbs, sugar, and fat. And I do it with enough of the right type of fiber, the right amino acids, all that stuff. So that's how fasting.
We're touching on this because this is a question that I think I get most often from people. How are you possibly tricking your body into fasting with eating, with food?
And that's the best question to ask, and that's a very, very pertinent one. We've done our homework. That's the most important thing I want to stress to everybody. We've validated this both in the labs, then in preclinical animal models, and then finally in humans as well in large trials. And what we've shown is that the pathways that we're talking about, and this is why I went through the effort of defining them, your body it still notices that you're eating food. That's how ProLon can preserve lean body mass. But if the thing that we're arguing is the good thing that occurs during fasting is autophagy, it's possible to stimulate that autophagy and that cellular cleanup and some of the more beneficial aspects of a fast by just tricking those pathways. And those pathways are not like an on-off switch. They're more like a roller coaster. You got to get over the hill to start the ride. So what Dr. Longo figured out is, how high is the hill for protein? How much protein can I give you before I turn on growth? And if I stay below that level, and is there a certain type of protein that does it better than others? And it turns out plant-based protein is much more effective at keeping you in a fasting state than animal-based protein. So if I give you the right sources of protein, I can give you more protein and stay below that threshold and keep the cell in a fasting state and in that repair mode of autophagy without necessarily getting the bad aspects. So I can give you all the stuff so we figured out how high the hill was for protein, figured out how high it was for sugar and carbs, and then figured out how much fat we could give you, and we added those all together, and that's where you get ProLon. It's not really about the total caloric amount, it's about the ratio of macronutrients in that. So that's how we mimic fasting. So when we say we're mimicking fasting, really what we mean is we keep the cells in that stress-resistant pro-autophagy state while still allowing you to eat stuff that'll help preserve lean body mass so your body doesn't have to eat your muscle tissue or your glycogen to do well. It'll help you do it just from an ease of use standpoint. You can get through multiple days in a row. Most people drop out of a water fast pretty quickly. So that's really why we exist. So, I mean, step one is get through it. Step two is, can we give you all the benefit? And we try to, and we think we do a pretty good job of it. And a lot of the research seems to support that. So
that's great. One of the other questions I get is, if you have this program and it's pretty much the same kind of food and calories for everybody, how does it affect somebody who's 130 pounds versus somebody who's 250 pounds?
That's a great question as well. So we did set it for one size fits all in terms of the food. You actually do drink more glycerol. The L drink that we give you on day 2 through 5 is designed because the way the body works and can use nutrition. One of the ways that you can spare the body from eating as much muscle during a fast is by giving it more glycerol when you're in a low insulin, high glucagon state, which happens after day 1. That's why we don't give you the L drink on day 1. And it is dosed by body weight. So the more you weigh, you do get more of that. While that's less food in your stomach and that may be more challenging, it still actually works out to a fairly similar amount of energy. So it isn't truly one size fits all, but yeah, part of it is that if you want to make a larger version for a larger person, it becomes very complicated to run that study. But more importantly, we tested it on various different sizes of animal models and then various different people. It works out that larger people do get a pretty significant benefit. Smaller people, really the threshold for it is below a certain size and weight, but going up, it tends to work a little more strongly if you're further away from your baseline. So it is one size fits all. We've debated whether we want to make a larger version, but it doesn't seem like that necessary. People can get through it. And with a little coaching and a little support, even the bigger people, they get through it just fine. So
absolutely.
I'm 6'1", 190, and I do okay. It was a struggle the first time, but now I'm pretty used to it. So.
I think it's a struggle for everybody the first time. It was a struggle for me the first time because you just don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and thank you for your support, letting people know what you can expect. And we'll probably talk about that here too. But yeah, setting expectations is important. Having a support network is important. So we provide that to give you health coaching calls and get emails every day to say, here's what you can expect today. Because We don't want you to be surprised that on day 2 or 3, on occasion, people can get a mild headache, or, day 3 and 4, some people get a little bit sore in the back of their legs. And those are just kind of things that can happen during a fast, or even during a low calorie or even a ketogenic diet. So these are just things that if we tell people ahead of time, they're not surprised or worried.
Yeah, I actually wrote a really long blog about my experiences and all the things that you can expect, based talking to guys. And so a lot of people find that really helpful, with takeaways and, little suggestions that to make it easier for them. So that's helpful as well. And I work with people, my clients, who are on the fast, and even people who just, order through my links and stuff. I make sure that I work with them personally to help them through the program. So I think it's great that you offer that as well. The other question I get often is, what happens after the fast, right? So you've lost this weight on the fast, and now you're off the fast. So how do you keep the weight off, and how do you make sure that all the weight that you've taken off doesn't come back right away when you start eating normally?
Yeah, and that's also a good question. So in our clinical trials, we didn't want to see what changing your diet looks like. So in our clinical trials, nobody changed their diet between cycles or after. Nobody changed their exercise habits. We tried to control for that. So we just saw what happens with ProLon. So most of our clinical data are based on people not doing what we want them to. And they still did pretty well. But the first time we did observe, and in our clinical trials, we had them do 3 cycles over 3 months. And that really seems to be the way to train the body into metabolic flexibility so that the results last a lot longer. There's no magic bullet that you do once and it works permanently. There's other than maybe surgical intervention, there's very little we can do in medicine that's the case. But the neat thing about 3 cycles, the first time you do it, people do tend to gain back a couple pounds. On average, they lose about 3% of their body weight. And then over the next several weeks, a little bit slower than a restrictive diet, they may gain back up to half of that. Generally speaking, if they adhere to a more stringent diet, we'll talk about in a moment, they tend to keep it off. But if they don't, if they just go back to their normal habits, they'll gain back about half and then do it again. They'll lose a little bit less, but they'll gain it back much more slowly. And then the third time is really when the body seems to adjust and become trained. It's like going to the gym. You got to get in shape. So once you get your cells in fasting shape, we tested people about 4 months later, and they still had about 60 to 90% of the benefits and the changes. And that was without any of the lifestyle or diet changes. This is just going back to the normal bad habits, and they still had 60 to 90% of the benefits. So that was pretty impressive to me, is that you can really train the body. But if you want to continue to improve, we do feel very strongly you should move to, and Dr. Longo outlines it in his book, the longevity diet. And most people report that it's much easier to portion control after ProLon. So that's a big thing. If portion control and healthy choices around Mediterranean style food is going to help you move forward. Obviously, we all encourage an exercise routine of some kind, but everybody needs to be evaluated for that. So,
great. Let's see what I have next here. Will it lower metabolism? Because a lot of people are worried if they restrict calories too much, what happens to your metabolism? How does it affect it?
And that's a great question. It's really, really hard, even with diet in general, as you're probably aware at this point, and everybody seems to know, it's really complicated. Humans are much, much, much more complicated than we think. It's not as simple as calories in, calories out. Like
I would say if it was that simple, everybody would be thin. Anybody
Yeah.
who can math, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, in med school, they taught us, 19 hours of nutrition, so it was atrocious. So we've, that's not a priority in the Western healthcare system, but it is now. It's moving that way. The last couple years, it started to trend that way, and we've been part of the push. We've invested heavily in scientific validation and trying to lend credibility to all of this. But what we think, because we don't know, nobody's done a great basal metabolic rate study with fasting, but fasting appears to be, and this is more anecdotal, it appears to be a pro increase in burn temporarily. So the short-term fast, your body's in survival mode, burn everything. So it burns all your visceral fat very quickly for energy. So in the short term of a couple days during the fast, it actually seems like it may increase basal metabolic rate. If you continue to go and you continue to restrict, eventually the body does adjust. But in the very short term of just about 5 days, it's hard to imagine that it would have a significant impact on things like your thyroid. So a lasting lower metabolic rate doesn't seem like the evidence supports that. It seems much more the opposite. Hence, if you do 1 cycle, you regain the weight fairly quickly, but not as quick as a restrictive diet that you're doing for like months at a time. But if you do 3 cycles, you keep the weight off a lot longer. And the only way that would work is if metabolic rate changed in some meaningful way. At least that's what it seems like. So if you're gaining back slowly over time as opposed to quickly, that would look like your metabolism has not slowed. So
that's great.
that's
So
how we think about it. So
I do ProLon probably every 8 to 12 weeks on the average. I love it. I mean, I'm nuts about the program. That's why I talk about it. I never try to sell anything or, you know, promote anything that I don't do myself or don't believe in. So how often should people do it? I mean, not everybody's going to do it every 2 to 3 months. So what's your take on how frequently people need to do this to be well and to maintain weight?
And then that's so for general wellness purposes. So our clinical trial was only based on 3 months in a row. So beyond that, we don't have really good published clinical data. But what we do think is for the vast majority of people with adequate body mass, because you have to have enough to not cannibalize your own good tissue. So if you're below about 18 BMI, this may not be the right program for you unless you get evaluated by a healthcare professional and they think you are a good candidate. But for most people, it looks like 3 cycles in a row to sort of train your cells into a nutrition state is probably the best thing you can do. And then going forward, it sort of depends on what your goals are. If you're at your metabolic goals, everything is right where you want it, you can go back to kind of a maintenance, which is very similar to what you're doing, which is for most people, it's once every 3 to 4 months. For some people who are in their late 30s and they're perfect right where they want to be, they can potentially get away with it less often, 2 to 3 times a year instead of 3 to 4. But for most people, it's going to be 3 to 4 times a year, basically pretty much every 3 months. It's what anecdotally seems to be the ideal for maintaining all the benefits you've got.
That's great info. Thank you for that. How does the ProLon fasting mimicking diet compare to a water fast, for instance, or one of the questions I get is the master cleanse. I know the master cleanse is a lot longer, but if you did 5 days of the master cleanse or a water fast, what are the, you know, is it better for you to do that, or is it, you know, what do you gain, lose?
So there is, I caveat this by saying we've not done a direct comparison with a 5-day water fast and 5-day fasting mimicking diet. But if you look at the data of people who have tracked the metrics of a water fast day by day by day, and you just look at the first 5 days, and again, nobody's really done 3 cycles, so we're not comparing apples to apples. So I'm trying to make sure I'm adequately letting everybody know the quality of the evidence we have. But from all the indications we see, the main differences between this and water fasting, and I'll talk about master cleanse in a second too, is that this will, because it gives you some nutrition, your body, when it goes into a fast, first will eat glycogen, which is in the liver and the muscles, and then it will eat amino acids and glycerin, and fat will begin to be metabolized to turn into ketone bodies and free fatty acids. So early on in a water fast, you are going to lose some muscle mass, and it looks like from the time that it takes to recover from it, some of that's actually amino acids, the muscle tissue itself. You don't see that with ProLon. For the vast majority of our users, they preserve or improve their lean body mass. They're not building muscle on the diet, but they're maintaining the muscle and losing fat, so their lean body mass is going up. So that's one of the main differences, that lean body mass. You're just not going to see that with a water fast in a master cleanse, because you're just not giving the body enough. The master cleanse, the challenge with that is that it gives you quite a bit of sugar. So it's got a tremendous, that maple, I think they use maple syrup in the master cleanse. So while you are going to lose a significant amount of weight just because you're not getting enough calories, it's much more of a restrictive diet than a fast, because your cells are still getting too much glucose and sugar to drive up it's called mTOR and pKa, or the mechanistic target of rapamycin and protein kinase A. Those are the metabolic signaling flares that when you eat sugar, they turn on and they put you in a growth state and they turn off fasting. So even though you're going to lose weight, you may go into ketosis even in some cases in the master cleanse, you're not going to get autophagy as far as we can tell. So you're not going to get that cellular cleanup. So
that's for the master cleanse. You're not going to go into autophagy for that.
Yeah, generally, nobody's shown that that's the case. And it doesn't look like it on paper. The reason we spent so much money and so much time validating this is because it is very important to keep that exact ratio. And if you go too high in one particular thing, you're going to just kick yourself out of a fasting state. So there really is no good way to do it other than what we've figured out. So
it's really interesting.
As far as we can tell.
Working out on the fast. So I know that you guys do not recommend it, and I always say that to everyone who asks. But what happens if you do? What happens if you do some light workouts, if you do some light lifting? Is that good? Is that bad? How does that work out?
Yeah, and that's so I'll give you our reasoning. Nobody again has done a great study, but there's three reasons why we say don't, and they make pretty good sense. One is, and we do know this from observation, if you work out really hard on the diet, you are going to burn calories, which is going to make you be at more of a calorie deficit and more likely to become lightheaded, fatigued, potentially dehydrated. So your risks go up. Two, if you work out to the point of fatigue or exhaustion, you may also use up too much calories and the body will go looking for them in your muscles. So you may actually end up eating some muscle if you work out too hard on the diet, even though it sounds like you're going to build it. But the third problem is that when you work out, the purpose of working out is to build muscle. And the way it happens is by releasing growth hormone, which is the opposite of fasting. So if you work out too hard, you may actually release growth hormones that'll turn off some of the benefits of fasting. So you'll undo some of the good stuff. So at the very least, if you're going to work out, no more than 15 minutes of vigorous exercise. We really encourage that instead you just do brisk walking, gentle yoga, things like that. Stay active, but don't go to the point of fatigue or exhaustion.
And what about light lifting in the gym, like resistance
Yeah,
training?
again, that's as long as you're not going to the point of incredible fatigue or exhaustion, you're probably not going to release that growth hormone. You just got to be careful not to burn too many calories, just because then you're going to create enough of a deficit that you may be a little more lightheaded. You may lose some muscle mass. So that's generally the reason we say it is more for safety than anything else. But there are also other reasons in terms of how well the diet works.
That's great. I didn't know that, so this is great information. This is a question from one of my clients who's been resistant to trying the fast. She asked, how is it that a 5-day restricted calorie diet is really going to change my life?
That's a good question. But the way you think about it is this. We were, up until very recently in human evolution, we were running out of food all the time. It's only been recent that we're living in a constant fed state. So temporarily cycling in and out of fasting, stress, relaxation, is just the same as working out. You want to be stressed, then relaxed. It builds better. That's the way our bodies were designed. It seems to be the way they work the best. Almost every research, and I say almost because I haven't read them all, almost every research paper, everyone that I've seen, supports very much that temporary changes in energy states in the cells appear to have benefits. New England Journal of Medicine did a big review of intermittent fasting in December and published it and showed that the biggest thing you want to develop is what's called metabolic flexibility. So just doing ProLon once is good. It's like going to the gym. It's good for you. But if you just go once, you're not going to get in great shape. You're going to get a lot of benefit even from doing it once in terms of cellular cleanup from everything we can tell. But it really, creating that metabolic flexibility in your cells is really what's going to lead you to a meaningful change. There's another thing that we haven't really talked about called IGF-1, or insulin-like growth factor 1, and it's your body's main regulator of growth and aging. And if you lower your IGF-1, studies looking at people around the world, in tens of thousands of people with lower IGF-1 up until a certain age tend to do a lot better and age, quote unquote, at a slower rate. Their age-related disease incidence tends to be lower. Now, we haven't done a study on long-term with ProLon and age-related disease in terms of does it reduce it, but it does seem to impact some of the biomarkers that may contribute to that. So we very strongly feel that doing ProLon fairly regularly will help you maintain healthy levels of IGF-1, which may contribute to healthy aging. So
That's great. Does it take away wrinkles too? Because inquiring minds want to know.
there's some anecdotal evidence. We're looking at that a little bit. A lot of the reports we get, and even one of our early trials, we actually asked people, how does your skin feel? And a lot of people reported healthier, glowing skin. So, and there again, every cell in your body notices when you stop eating or when you go into a fasting mimicking state. So maybe dermal tissue may regenerate. Nobody's done a biopsy on humans to really measure dermal thickness, but I notice my skin clears up and certainly feels more taut and bright afterwards. So
I asked you totally anecdotally, but I agree with you completely. I feel, after I do the fast, I feel fantastic and my skin looks better. Everything looks better. It feels better. I'm more energy. It's an amazing program. So I agree with you, but it's interesting to think about it from a scientific point of view.
Well, I'm very, very grounded in the research, and it's the first time I did the diet. I I realized that there's way more to medicine than just what's on the paper, because I do notice brighter feeling, mental clarity, higher energy levels, things on me work better. So it's just a nice, it's, for me, that's a really nice part. But it's, again, part of it is the diet. It's really carefully constructed. But the major thing is that we're triggering an innate thing that's built into everybody. We're just activating your own mechanisms. So it's not like a supplement or anything which will block one path or contribute to one path, and we hope we got it right. This is triggering a cascade that every cell in your body knows the dance. And all we're doing is sending the signal to start the dance. And your body does it all for you. And we just keep you busy, and we keep you as satiated as we can. And we try to preserve your muscle mass while your body does that dance.
So another question that I get, I have some folks who are super holistic, who are really into, you know, real foods and natural foods and whole foods. And then there are a couple of ingredients in ProLon that are questionable. So the question is it worth it to do the 5 days of ProLon, you know, and, you know, I'm assuming those ingredients, you know, like natural flavors, for example, or soy, that they're minimal in the 5 days, which is what I say, but I'd love to hear it from your point of view, because folks get really, really hung up on these little quantities of these, you know, these ingredients, and kind of lose the big picture of ProLon. So I'd love for you to address that.
Yeah, and those are, I totally understand their concerns. I do take a similar approach to you. I say kind of don't miss the forest for the trees. We know it does all these wonderful things. Those things may have a tiny bad impact if you believe some of the research. Most of it is sort of questionable or not yet confirmed. But I'd rather you get the full benefits and do 5 days of eating something that you may be mildly emotionally opposed to, then miss out on all the great stuff. But to answer some of those specifically, one, we don't have soy, we have soy extract, and we have it for a couple of reasons, but it doesn't register the same in the body, and the way the source is very natural and clean. But I do understand we're working towards getting rid of even the soy extract. But at the moment, we test it. If you test the product, it registers as soy-free. But I do understand their concern. We're coming out with a ProLon professional version that is going to be eliminating some of the common pain points that people have. There are a couple other ingredients that people do tend to question, and you know, one of my least favorite is people say you have MSG in the product. We absolutely do not have MSG. We have yeast extract, which is glutamate, and you need glutamate. Your body uses glutamic acid to maintain nerve tissue.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that's a question I get a lot. Exactly.
So we do not have MSG. We never have. It's specifically glutamate. So it's just, part of it is that it helps bind things together so the soup is smoother and it tastes better, but more importantly, it gives you stuff to maintain your nerve health, which if you don't eat the glutamate, your body will just make it. So you have glutamate anyway. So all we're doing is providing it from the outside. So it really is an important part of the body process, and it's somewhat misunderstood. People see yeast and they think monosodium glutamate. So just to clarify, we don't do that. So, and there are a couple other things, and I understand that people want less processed, more whole food. The only way you can really make a invisible food, quote unquote, is by doing it the way we do it. Ideally, we would move towards all of that, and we're working towards that, but there's a lot of product concerns, a lot of we cover shipping. So if you want to get a shelf-stable product that's accurate and has been clinically validated, you have to do it this way. So there are some constraints around it, which we recognize and acknowledge. And even Dr. Longo says very clearly, whole foods, eat from your grandfather's table. You know, we know that. So we work as close as we can, and there are as few processing steps as possible in the diet. We do provide whole natural olives from a blue zone region that have been carefully controlled the whole way. We do include a lot of really tremendous ingredients, and the foods are, you know, vacuum freeze dried. They're not chemically altered or anything like that. So
I have to tell you something funny. I hate olives. I've always hated olives, and for some reason, the olives in the fast are amazing. They're so good. It's so crazy, and I've heard that from other people too. So I don't know what you do to the olives.
Whenever anybody says that, yeah, they say I hate olives. What can I substitute it with? And I say, give it a shot.
Yeah,
I despise olives.
I sell them separately because honestly, I would buy them. They're so good.
We're talking about that,
Yeah.
but it's a while, so.
Yeah, I think it would be a great idea to sell some of the soup separately, because some people could substitute if they don't like something. Or
So we actually do allow that. You bring up a great point. If you are allergic to something, generally, usually it has to be an allergy or food sensitivity for us to do it. But we will substitute soups. We don't pull them out and put in a different one. We'll just send you extra. So we can supply them to you, and you can help distribute them as you see fit. Or if anybody has a specific request on types of soup and they know what they like, when you go to purchase in the notes section, just specify that and we can send you extra.
Wow, that's fantastic. I didn't know that.
I do want to clarify, we tested it. The current version that's in the box is what was clinically tested. So if you do make any substitutions or changes, we're getting a little far away from the science. We have to be careful.
I see.
So.
That's good to know. Thank you. The last question I have, and I think you may have answered that during our conversation, is why ProLon versus any other detox or fast out there? And I think we've covered that, but if you want to touch on that again, just separately, that would be great.
So ProLon is the only 5-day cleanse, if you want to call it that, that's been clinically tested to this level in this scrutiny. We've got hundreds of human subjects that have been published in peer-reviewed literature. We've got, at this point, 40 clinical trials in various phases of completion. We expect to publish between 5 and 7 this year. We're putting as much effort on validating that it does what we say it's going to do as possible. And beyond that, we figured out a way to do it in what we think is pretty much the only way that you can get all of these benefits in 5 days. There are other things that may give you some benefits. Intermittent fasting certainly has its place, where you do a 16-hour fast or a 12-hour fast. And in fact, we advocate that. Dr. Longo eats 2 meals a day, one in the morning and one in the evening. And that's, so we're big believers in that. But if you want to trigger that cellular autophagy while preserving lean body mass, this appears to be the best way to do that. And if, weight loss, which is more of a side effect, is pretty effective. Most people lose quite a bit, and it's usually central trunk weight loss. So it tends to be from the midsection, the visceral fat, which is the bad fat that surrounds your organs. So there's a lot of good stuff that happens in just 5 days. So
does it act like a detox? I have a lot of those questions as well.
Depends on what you define a detox as, but this in terms of triggering, getting rid of the things that aren't the way they're supposed to be, if that's that's really what a detox should be. So on a cellular level, yeah, it's essentially a detox. It will trigger the autophagy pathways and even the apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. So if a cell is too broken, it'll delete itself. If a cell needs to be repaired, it will. So in that sense, yeah, it's very much a detox. And your organs, at the very least in animal models and in humans, it appears that we help them maintain healthy function. So they're going to do their jobs better. So they would potentially help clean you up better. So
plus give you so much more with this fast. It's not just a detox. It's not just a juice fast or whatever, because it provides you with so many other benefits. Mm-hmm. It's great. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about doing ProLon in the age of coronavirus and quarantine, and how that would benefit you and what that would do for you, sitting, doing the fast while you're kind of sitting at home and trying not to raid the fridge.
So apologies, there are going to be some specifics about how I have to answer that. I want to make sure I'm very careful and very clear. So as a company, we make the following stance. No one's really done a great study on during fasting what happens with the immune system. Now, we've had about almost 200,000 people do our diet. And at this point, we have not received reports of any statistical increase in rate of infection afterwards or during. So there does not appear to be necessarily a correlation. But because no one's done a study, even though there's pretty good evidence that post-fasting, there's some really beneficial things that happen and your immune system appears to be helping maintain at a healthy level, during its question mark, we do advise people to be fairly careful. So specifically, we say if you're over 65, given the risks of COVID-19 for you, now is probably not the best time to be doing a fast unless your doctor recommends it. Also, if you're immunosuppressed, same deal. But for generally healthy people who are quarantined, who don't have any signs or symptoms of infection and don't have anyone around them that have any signs or symptoms of infection, there's no particular increase in risk to doing diet at the moment. And it may help you in some ways combat some of the things that occur by sitting at home during a prolonged quarantine. So it's the COVID-15, if they're calling it. So
could be COVID-19 if you're not careful.
Yeah. So in sort of restricted scenario, it's probably a really great idea right now, but we just want to be very careful to state that we don't know what happens. And if you do develop signs or symptoms of any type of infection, we do encourage you to discontinue the diet and resume whatever diet seems normal to you or seems appropriate and contact your doctor. So we do want people to be careful. No particular statistical reason, but we just, because it's unknown, we want them to make sure that they're doing a really good job of protecting themselves first.
That makes sense. And if their regular diet involves Twinkies and, all kinds of bad stuff, I would strongly recommend that they change their diet and start eating whole foods, right?
As would I. I just want to, make sure I'm safe and careful on my answer. So.
Absolutely, from the scientific point of view. And I also want to say that one of the things that, one of the reasons I've been encouraging people to do this diet while they're in quarantine is because, you tend to be not disciplined. You're home all day. You don't have a schedule. And this kind of gives you a foolproof way to discipline yourself, to figure out what you're eating during the day, to minimize that and help you lose weight during quarantine instead of, gaining and
Yeah, great point. And obviously, there's the effect of stress eating, where it is potentially a very stressful time for a lot of people. So it's much more natural to reach for foods that tend to be viewed as kind of comfort foods.
and emotional eating because they're
Yeah.
lonely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is one behavioral tool that I think this is very useful for, as long as you're doing it in a safe setting.
Super. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today and taking the time to explain a lot of the stuff. I didn't even know some of this, so this is really educational for me, and I'm sure it will be for the people that view this. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I do always want to say thank you so much for having me. If you have any medical diagnosis or any prescription medication, you should really be going through a healthcare professional to do this. If you're concerned about whether or not you can tolerate a 5-day fast or fasting mimicking diet, please reach out to us. We have a great team. We can help answer any questions you may have. And if you just have any questions in general and you need some support during it, we offer that as well. So please feel free to help get some support from us. You don't have to do it alone. For many people, it is easy, but for others, it's challenging. So we're here to help. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Great. Thank you so much, doctor. I appreciate it.